Yesterday, Aaron Kuntz's new film, The Pale Door, began streaming on many VOD services. For many of us who have been eagerly awaiting his next project following Scare Package, it's a difficult film to review. Now, before we start, I want to say that Aaron is a friend of the show, so before there's any indications that I have a bias in this review, let me state this. Pale Door is not a perfect film, and a lot of that I feel owes to its budget. There's a movement in America right now that I think is very healthy towards new, micro-budgeted horror films actually having a platform for release so that these films can actually be seen and these directors and producers and writers can develop their craft in an environment where they're still being productive. That's so important to me, and I never want to say a bad word about any of the individuals who are actually building the next generation of American horror. Because as you know, I think that foreign horror right now has been surpassing American horror on the regular. Pale Door is the kind of brave experiment that we need. I have problems with the movie at the same time, and we'll get to that. But let's talk up first about what it is. Early in the credit sequence, you see that it is presented by Joe R. Lansdale, one of our premier horror storytellers. His work has been so consistently great for so many decades now, it's hard not to see him as simply a true master of horror in the literary sphere. His work was adapted for the Masters of Horror television series, and if you know the film Bubba Ho-Tep, you're well aware of Joe R. Lansdale's work and his importance and his vitality. And you see some of that here. Director Aaron Kuntz shows a great deal of talent behind the camera. There's so many images that are really, really, really well composed and really do help to push the story forward in exactly the way it needs to go. It also features some magnificent performances from most of our lead cowboys. And if they sometimes come off as if they're in a television project, that's not entirely a bad thing, because there is something to be said for acting to the scale of the project you're working inside. This isn't a huge budgeted film bound for multiplexes across the country, though it is getting some drive-in theaters to show it. The acting is appropriate for the frame, and it is really great acting for most of the cast. Now, there are a few smaller roles that I can't say that of, but for this type of filmmaking, the acting is outrageously better than normal. The film, however, really does outstay its welcome. It's a little longer than it needs to be. The editing is not quite as sharp as it needs to be. And there's a certain randomness to some of the sequences, whereas you feel as if perhaps they were written in a different order than they ended up being in the final film, and the strings are still a little too apparently connected. That said, it's a hard film not to engage with. You'll have a reaction, even if it's a negative reaction, because the Weird Western is just such a great format for film. It's long endured as a literary form, but it really has never taken hold in film the way the subgenre in literature has exploded. So it's nice to see someone take it on here. Pale Door will also inevitably draw comparisons to From Dusk Till Dawn, which I both see and I find annoying. Because although it is a cross-genre film that changes the genre it is properly a part of about midway through, it is so vastly different in its approach and its sentimentality that the two projects really couldn't be more dissimilar past that narrative conceit. Also, when the villains strike, it's a completely different sort of attack. Whereas the vampire attack in From Dusk Till Dawn is extremely stylized, here the action is a lot more naturalistic. And that probably plays into the budget as well, but it also gives it an immediacy. So where do I stand on Pale Door? Did it live up to my expectations? Well, that's not exactly fair. I'm not sure what my expectations were of the film. I was rooting for it, and I got a lot out of it that I enjoyed. But I think it promises a stronger film than ultimately it delivers. Should you watch it? Absolutely. It's heading to Shudder later this year, so if nothing else, catch it while you're already paying your $6 a month. But is it worth the independent rental, that $6 or $7 you'll pay to just see it and lose it in 24 hours? That's going to depend on how much you like independent horror, as well as how much you like cross-genre material. If you think you'll be annoyed by a Western horror film, then you probably shouldn't. I'm going to hedge my bets here and say that most of this audience, the people who follow this channel, will get more to enjoy than to not enjoy in the film. But go in with your eyes open. It's a film made for a price, and they couldn't afford all the luxuries of a major studio with a major production budget. If you're willing to be a little forgiving, there's a lot to like here. But keep in mind, this is not going to make it onto my top 10 films of the year. It already has not qualified, and we're not through the year yet. By all means, I encourage you to check it out. But your mileage is definitely going to vary on this one.